welcome to the commentary box. I am your host, Sam Turner, and of course we are always joined by our other host, Jake Griffiths. How are you, Jake?
I'm good. I'm looking forward to getting this one going. A couple of juicy topics. Of course, Mourinho is a never-ending cycle when mentioned in our podcasts here. Always in the news, not always for the right reasons.
Yes, of course, we're going to talk a bit about Mourinho today. Of course, as you said, he's one of our favourite topics on the show. And though we've talked about him a lot, I think it would be a bit foolish to not talk about him today.
Yeah.
Later on in the show, we'll be talking a bit about Danny Drinkwater and where it's all gone wrong for him, really, and what his future is at Chelsea if he has one. And then at the end, we'll be talking a bit about racism in football. But yes, before we go ahead, of course, there's been one big departure from the Premier League, and that is not Yunus Kabul's leaving Watford by mutual consent. It is Mourinho being sacked by Manchester United. I mean, if people want to talk about Yunus Kabul, I'm sure we can fit it in somewhere, but the big news is, of course, Mourinho finally being sacked by Manchester United. And Jake, you asked me, I think it was either last podcast, and I said Manchester United would basically keep him for the rest of the season, because I think you were asking about whether you think he'll be sacked, and I'm wrong. They've sacked him. So what's your opinions on it?
Well, I can't remember too far back, but I think I would have agreed with you in terms of I think they should keep him. However, I think they would keep him for as long, maybe till the end of the season at least. But I think it's such a hard situation with United right now, because again, are we comparing it too much to the Alex Ferguson era? But you look at it and you think, well, where Manchester United's level is, it's basically at the top. Whether it's either, if you're not winning the league in the season, you're having a very, very good cup run, or you've done something good in Europe. It's always a very high standard. So it was always going to be hard for him to meet it. But we look at the previous managers who's come before him, the likes of Moyes and Van Gaal, and when we compare it to them, I believe he had a slightly better win percentage than all of those. So in terms of recent times, yes, he's done better. But I think in terms of almost unity and support for the club and sort of the general consensus of Manchester United, I think it's got a lot worse since he's come in. Because I think when he first came in, it looked like, big name, big changes almost. And, we were going to see some progression in the squad. He would give him time, 3 seasons he lasted. So he had some time to bring in his own players, start to develop a style of play that he would like to play. Obviously, being known as quite a defensive manager may not be the most attractive style of football, but still, we were looking forward to seeing how it was going to work. And I think it was quite promising, but it never really almost seemed to click, so to speak. You could see with the bigger players of the club, I think the biggest one to talk about here is Paul Pogba, because lots of things have been going on internally within the club, within Pogba and Mourinho, and it just seems that sort of summed up in a way his time there. It was just a bit like on and off, not really consistent, not really performing at the level it should be. When you've got players and management, arguing behind the scenes, it's being broadcasted and sort of written about in the media, and it's all up there and people are talking about it a lot. It just gives quite a negative image of the club, especially of what they want to give off. They want to give off this sort of positive unity sort of vibe and feeling. We know Mourinho hasn't been amazing at this sort of player relations. We know there are some players who do fall out with him and things like that, but it never really seemed to go as well as he wanted. Like, we look at players in terms of underperforming. We've got the likes of sort of Sanchez, Lukaku, those sort of top players who have they really been performing to their top level at United? I think most people would say not. Obviously, Pogba in that bunch of names there. I feel like in terms of his league record, never even doing that great. Sometimes playing the big teams, they might get a good result. For example, when they came back and they beat City in that Manchester derby, I think it might have been last season that was. And everyone was shocked. You're like, oh, this is the United we want. You know, you can see them spirit, them fighting back, and then we see Pogba score, but then it just loses consistency, and again it just sort of goes down the hill a bit. And you know, in terms of the league table, you know, they're in 6th place. It's not the end of the world, but it's just poor from United. Like, yes, they may be in 6th place, but they're 8 points off Arsenal, who are above them, and then they're only a point above Wolves, and then 2 points above West Ham, Watford, and Everton. So it's very, very tight. You know, they lose one game, and all of those people get a good result, and then they're sitting in 10th. But it's just not. It's not good enough. You know, they can, if all the teams below them win and they lose, they can sit in 11th place. Like, it's just crazy how much you can fluctuate down there. And, you know, you can see the big gap between the top 5 this season and United and the others. So I feel like his time was never great. I know we talk about and we joke about before, so about him winning the treble. And obviously it is impressive to win 3 trophies, like, you know, in a short space of time. But when you look at the quality of those trophies, none of them were exceptional or as the historical treble, as we like to say, winning sort of like the league, the cup, and the Champions League. So
yeah,
it's hard to sort of like pin like a sentence or two on their sort of on his time at the club, but to try and sum up and shorten it, I'd say that it's just not been good enough. It's not been United standard. Now, I'm not talking about Fergie's standard, but I say it's just not been United standard.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think you touched on it earlier. Though Mourinho has had like a better record than the managers before him, like Van der Gaal, Moyes, and Giggs. I think they have digressed in like their performances and their kind of feel about the club. Because I remember when Van der Gaal was in charge, yeah, things weren't going great, but there was still that sense that like they're still competing with players, they're still kind of one of the top clubs. But then I think since Mourinho's taken charge, they've become a bit of a laughing stock, if that makes any sense. They're that team that everyone sees as like, oh yeah, doing terrible at the moment. They won't ever be good after Ferguson left. But there's a different kind of sense around the club after Mourinho has taken charge, and it's not a positive one. And just to kind of say, we did put out a tweet asking you whether Mourinho should have been sacked, which is on our Twitter, which you can follow at Box Commentary, and 75% of people said that yes, he should have been sacked, and that's out of 16 votes. So it's fairly convincing that a lot of people thought that Mourinho should have been sacked, and I think ultimately, I think it's true, because Man United have not been where they want to be. As you've said, there's been troubles in the dressing room, and it's just not been great for Man United fans. It's not been great for the club, and it's trying to get out that negative kind of persona, and I think potentially they have now, and it'd be interesting to see how Man United go forward in the future. And of course, they have now hired Ole Gunnar Solskjær on a kind of interim basis till the end of the season, the ex-Cardiff and Mulder boss. And I'm really excited to see how he does. I mean, I've literally just seen somewhere, which is quite funny, someone saying, is Ole gonna succeed? Which is a bit kind of, because his name's Ole Gunnar Solskjær. Oh, yeah, saw that somewhere. But yeah, do you think he's gonna succeed as Man United boss?
Well, I think just for clarification, I think we need to sort of define what we're saying succeed, because in a way succeed could just be doing better than Mourinho now. I'd say if he gets in the top 5 this season, that's a success. If he wins, you know, or just not even, if he just adds a bit more consistency to the squad, you know, they start to pick up a bit more points, start to win the games they should. You know, not necessarily beating any of the top 5 and being incredibly consistent, clean sheet, but, you know, they start to beat, you know, every team in the bottom, say 10, you know, they get victories against those. You know, we just see a bit more consistency. I think the odds are in his favour, like, because in terms of, you look at that squad and you look at how they're performing, and they should not be performing how they are at all, Sam, because, you know, the players they got is incredible. And for them to be where they are, is just quite shocking. I don't think anyone would have thought United would be sitting in 6th on the table this year. So it'd be interesting to see. I think I think he will. Like, I'm looking at his managerial history just to give a bit of sort of background on it. You know, he's managed that Norwegian side now for about total, I think it's about 7 or 8 years. Having had a spell at Cardiff for only a year, so we've had a little taste of English football. Obviously, now coming to Manchester United, a club that he played at, a club which he scored that winning goal against Munich in the 1999 Champions League to make them win. So he's been under pressure at the club. You know, he's played there for a long time. You know, it's probably the best environment for him, like to come to a club that you've done so well at, and the one that you played for a long time. That's certainly going to help him. He's going to have a lot of passion for the club. And I feel some people, they're not describing him to Fergie, but they're saying that he's got traits of how Ferguson was. For example, you know, that classic hairdryer method people talked about.
Yeah.
Apparently he's one of those, and he's I think there was an article, it might have been on the BBC or something, and it was saying that he said that he'll use the hairdryer, and he was like, you don't want to. He's like, I think he's almost not afraid to sort of give them a bit of stick. Like, he was like, if he gets disappointed, he's not gonna sort of go back and go, you know, it's okay, guys, you know, we can carry on. And I know obviously not all managers are like this, but I feel like that is the sort of Fergie way. You know, when they do well, he will praise them, and when they do bad, he will very much let them know about it. So there's sort of, you don't give them like praise and go, well, sort of well done for trying, etc. I think he's got that sort of mentality, and I think that sort of almost like a kick up the bum mentality might actually give them a bit of a boost, you know, sort of a kick start, so to speak.
Yeah.
Personally, I think he will. I think at the end of the season we'll look back at it and we'll go, no, it was a successful season for him. But I think people are going to go, you know, we look at the circumstances under where he was in the league and everything like that. I can't really see them finishing in the top 5. And if they do, I think it'd be the fault of one of the top 5 currently falling down and slipping. So I can see them finishing 6th. I can't see them getting back into the top 5 now. But I can see them putting some pressure on Europa League, that 5th place spot. You know, out of all those teams in the top 5, Sam, if one of those were going to slip, who do you think would slip?
Well, that's a tough question. I think obviously Manchester City won't drop, Liverpool won't drop. It's basically between Chelsea, Tottenham, and Arsenal. I think Tottenham, if they get a few injuries, you never know, they could drop, which is a likelihood. I think Arsenal, under Emery, I think they're probably still finding their feet. I mean, I know they've been unbeaten for a long time now, but I think maybe a few bad results and they could find themselves a lack of confidence and kind of just slipping down the table. And then Chelsea, again, I think are safe, though, actually. I think Chelsea are safe because they've got the tactics to kind of grind out games, and I don't think they'll ever slip down too far. So I think it's between Arsenal and Tottenham if any teams are going to slip out. But you mentioned that you might think that Man United will get 6th. Do you think that's a success for this season in hindsight of what's the beginning of the season's been like, or do you think it's not even success for this season?
Yeah, it's tough. I feel like at the moment, Mourinho, if he stayed in the season, I can see him finishing around 6th to 8th, 6th, 7th or 8th. I reckon is where he would finish. I'm not really seeing any improvement in the squad at all. Really, I feel like he's not the sort of manager that suddenly snaps into form. I feel like there's a gradual progression in that, and you can see the players performing consistently over time. And they start to do really, really well, and then bang, they hit lots of form. It's not like just like a hit form randomly and that's it. Like, I don't think that sort of thing happens. So I think if they finish 6th now, because Mourinho's gone, it will be a success. Because in theory, when you get rid of a manager, at first you're going to do worse, and then it shows the character of the players and the type of manager you bring in to see whether he's going to improve that. So I say if they finish now, if they finish in 6th at the moment, yes, it's a success for Ollie. But
okay,
in terms of United, it's still going to be like a failure of a season, because I think like every season United should really be, well, they will be aiming for the top four. And if they don't get that, that's going to be a big disappointment. I think it's almost like Arsenal when Wenger was in charge, when it was sort of like, you know, they not aim for fourth, but like as long as they get fourth, get that Champions League spot, you know, that is their target each season. So yeah, in terms of Ollie, success for sixth, but in terms of United and this season and sort of what they were hoping to achieve, I'd say a failure.
Yeah, I see what you mean. There's like almost two kind of objectives, and they both need to kind of be taken in context. And then to bring the conversation kind of back to Ole Gunnar Solskjær, I mean, I think I saw the same article as you, and I think I saw I watched his interview, and he came across as being really kind of down to earth, and happy kind of a manager. Because like if you look at Mourinho, he didn't really have that kind of happiness around him, and the club kind of followed him in that way, and there was not a lot of joy at the club. And then like with what's his name, Van der Haar, it was again a slightly different tone, a bit happier, and there was a positive mood. And I think with Ole Gunnar Solskjær, I think he's going to bring this kind of positive mood into the club. He's obviously an ex-player, the fans obviously love him, and he's got this positive aura about him that I think Man United really need at the moment. Because if you look at the players, they're all kind of not gel. There's a lot of, I think there's probably, you could say there's a lot of cliques. There's a lot of like power kind of struggles between players. I think they're not really acting as a team at the moment. So if Ole Gunnar Solskjær can use his positive mentality, because he was always smiling through the interview, I think it will be really helpful for Man United. And of course, it's I think he's a really good manager, not only because he's done well in Norway, but he got Cardiff relegated, so you know that's pretty good.
Yeah, so happy days for you.
Happy days for me, but yeah, I think when he was at Cardiff, he did the best he could. I mean, it was his first experience in Premier League management. I think he was given probably a pretty poor squad, and he couldn't do a lot. So I would almost think, just kind of say, if I was him, I'd say, yeah, I did badly at Cardiff, but it was my first time. They were already struggling. I did my best. And if you looked at it, the club actually still respected me as a manager. And I think that's all he's got to say. And I think this is a great opportunity for him as a manager, because I think I was talking to you about this off air. Because it's a win-win situation. If he, at the end of the season, Man United, I'll say, finished in 8th, which is not great, he won't have a tarnished reputation because he's come in to a team that's already performing poorly. It won't like affect him too much, and he's not there for the future. But if he does really well and say gets into the top 5 or finishes 6th, he might it boosts his profile, and he might actually continue to be Man United manager. So it's a win-win either way, because he's getting to manage a big club, get some really good experience, and it can't really go horribly wrong.
Yeah, I feel like if you're gonna, I think he's got a good chance and opportunity here. Like you said, you know, it's gonna definitely help his career a bit if he does well, and sort of things are in his favour. I don't think things can get too worse with the squad he's got. You know, there are always going to be players who perform well. You know, they've got one of the best keepers in the world, and some top class players. And you know, if they get a bit of form together, who knows what damage they could cause. And just a little point here, I want to sort of ask you what you think about this, Sam, in terms of sort of everything going on. Two things. Firstly, what do you think about did you hear about Paul Pogba's did some Instagram post about a couple of hours before Mourinho was sacked, and it was sort of a smirky face looking at the camera, and I think it says something like "caption this." Did you see about that?
No, I didn't see about that. No.
So this, I'll tell you about it. So this came up, and this caused quite a lot of trouble. And there was big things online. I think Gary Neville actually did this tweet where he saw him caption this thing, and then he was just like, "You get out of our club too." So he was quite angry at the time and frustrated at Pogba for what he did. Yeah. And he caused quite a bit of uproar on social media. Actually, there's a lot of things about it. Some people were saying that it was because they said it was a sponsored post by Instagram. By Adidas. because he was wearing sort of an Adidas top on the side. But it was a little dodgy in his expression of his face. And, we all know about how their relationship to get the Jose and Paul's wasn't exactly the smoothest ride. And it caused a lot of trouble. And let's because I think you can only take this as it's deliberate and you can talk about it, or if it wasn't deliberate, then there's just nothing to say. So if it was deliberate, what would your thoughts be on that? Do you feel like they should, could you punish Pogba for doing that? Is it a serious enough thing? And B, does it show anything about Pogba and sort of the type of player and the type of character he's got? Is he going to be trouble for managers to handle just throughout his career?
First of all, I think probably the most likely thing is it's not him having a go or kind of smirking at Mourinho leaving, because most likely he probably didn't even know about it, because if it was 2 hours before, I mean, he might have known about it, but I'm pretty sure all the players would have kind of known at the same time, and it would have been after, because unless they sacked him in the morning and kind of only released it in the afternoon. I mean, but I think it's unlikely that he did it for that. I think it's just a coincidence. But if it was kind of him doing that to spite Mourinho, we've seen plenty of players kind of come out after a manager's been sacked and kind of saying what's been wrong and what's kind of going wrong. I mean, it's not normally before the manager's been sacked officially. It's normally maybe a few years afterwards, or even a few, like the end of the season, actually. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say it's anything out of the ordinary. Maybe it does reflect on maybe there was a lot of kind of beef between him and Mourinho. Yeah. But I don't think it's a reflection of his personality. Because obviously, when he's on form, he acts as like a captain, I think. And when he's played for Juventus, he's been such a kind of stalwart. And when he's played for France, he's led by example. And of course, all footballers kind of have a life of kind of riches, and they like social media a lot. And so I don't think it's anything to do with personality. And I think the only reason, if he has done it on purpose, the only thing I would say is that maybe it's because he's actually really been driven by Mourinho to kind of have this attitude, because at the moment, I guess, at Man United, he's kind of being subdued. He's been kind of the scapegoat apart from Mourinho. And I think it's maybe just a bit of relief for him, if that makes any sense, and it's not a reflection on his true kind of personality. Yeah,
I can see that. I can understand how you think, and I think you're right. I feel like it was just in the end just a marketing ad, and it had nothing to do with it. But did seem a bit dodgy, especially if it came from him. I feel like if it was someone like De Gea, I feel like you wouldn't even consider about it, because it's Pogba, such a big name, everything. Just another little point I wanted to mention about sort of Mourinho and his player relations. I know Mourinho, he hasn't really been known for developing players so much. I know some people talk about Luke Shaw. He got a lot of criticism from Mourinho, but he started to sort of almost take that on board, and Shaw has developed a bit as a player. But I think in general, sometimes people look at him and, I hear lots of people on, say, like the Sky Sports debate or things like that, and they say, you know what, could Mourinho have developed that player? I don't know. But just another little sort of player relation issue that came up. I don't know if you heard recently about the Alexis Sanchez and Marcus Rojo alleged to have made a 20k bet on Mourinho's sacking. I think Alexis Sanchez being in favour of sacking, of Mourinho being sacked sort of by the end of the season or by Christmas. First of all, did you hear about this?
I heard something about this, but not fully.
Yeah, because I thought this was just sort of a little tweet, not a big news, but there's actually like quite a few articles online about it. And I don't know how this sort of thing comes up. And I don't really know how this happens, but like in terms of sort of respect for a manager, I would have thought Mourinho, out of a lot of managers in the league, would be one of those players who gets one of those managers who get quite a lot of respect for their players. I feel like players sort of look up to him. You look at his history of clubs. the likes of Porto and Chelsea and Madrid. You know, he's played for he's managed top clubs and done like sort of very well with all of those. So I'd never even heard of this before. Like, I've never heard of anything like this. And I think, again, this sort of just sums up and just shows you how badly it was going wrong. Even if this wasn't not true, there must be some truth or some idea, or someone must have said something for it to come up, because it's quite a random thing. I've never ever heard of it before. I know Sanchez didn't play too much. Rojo probably played a little bit more, but still not a huge amount of football that he would have played. Just, I'm more in shock that's even a story, that's even like something that players are maybe not considering, because it's not actually been proven he's done it. But you know, it's got to sort of come from somewhere. And you know, I feel like, you know, players might have been talking about whether he's going to get sacked or not. I don't know if a bet was properly made, but I think it's just one of those stories you like Mourinho just wouldn't want in the media. He doesn't want this sort of stuff circulating, especially sort of a United fan as well. You know, you're seeing negative stories about your club all the time, about, you know, things happening between players, you know, some of your best players leaving, and then problems between sort of Pogba and Mourinho. It just, all of those things happening behind the scenes. I think it was so unstable. You know, I can definitely see the reasoning behind sort of why United chose to get rid of him. Yeah,
I think on that point though, you talk about like how like he should be a respected manager, and I think he should be, but I think the game has changed a lot, and I think the Man United players he's got kind of are the worst kind of part of the game, the modern game. Because if you look at Sanchez as an example, and like Rojo, they're two players that you are kind of not bad influences, but they sum up the modern footballer. Kind of like don't put the effort in, kind of look like they're always doing it for the money almost at the moment. And if you look at the whole Man United squad, there's a lot of players like that. And if you compare it to, like, say, the Liverpool squad under Klopp, he's got some the kind of work hard, talented players like Milner, Henderson, Mane, Salah. They all kind of work for the team. They all have kind of strong personalities that is about kind of work rate and kind of teamwork. And then you look at the Man United squad, and it's completely different. And I don't know whether that's Mourinho's fault for getting the wrong type of players, or if it's the Man United board's fault, but they've created this atmosphere where things like the betting incident, if it's true, happen. And if you look at Mourinho's Chelsea squad, the first one, he had lots of leaders like Klopp does now, where you have like John Terry, you got Frank Lampard, and he didn't have those players at Man United, which is part of his downfall. And he's obviously not been able to kind of bring about any kind of team leaders, or bring about any faces that can like bring this Man United the squad together, and that's obviously been his main downfall, really. And I think he should be a respected manager, but he hasn't got the respect of the squad, and that's partly why he's been sacked in the end.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think like you look at those sort of players, like different players under different clubs, and sort of the attitude of it. I feel like you look at, for example, Tottenham right now, and I would say, not to be rude, but like you sort of look at the big egos in there. I can't really see many. I say maybe Ali, possibly, but he's not exactly a huge sort of ego-headed person. I feel like Kane is very humble. You know, all those players, they seem to be quite. They realise, you know, they're fighting for the team, they're fighting for the players and their manager, and it's not sort of a "I'm bigger than the club" attitude. And then you look at other players at sort of like United and that, and then you can see almost the complete opposite, like you're saying, like with the likes of Pogba, possibly slightly, but definitely when we talk about, you know, Sanchez and Rojo, I can see what you mean by that. You know, players are almost there just to get their bill paid, and they're not 100% fussed about the club and how well they do, as long as they're getting their money and earning out their contract. That's sort of their main priority in a way. I think that's probably concluded our sort of Mourinho and sort of Manchester United section. I think some good points were made, and I think we've covered that. Just before we go on to our next section, actually, I've got two things I just want to mention. One thing is when we did I did a Snapchat story, which we are now on Snapchat under Box Commentary as usual. And actually, one of our followers on there did reply to one of our stories that we did, and they said that Yaya is going to Arsenal, and they've called that. And I just want to get your thoughts on that. Just quickly, I know we touched on it last time we talked about Yaya Toure. Is he going to come back to the Premier League? Things like that. I'll let you know my opinions on this transfer rumour, which has been suggested by one of our fans, but I'll let you go first. What do you think the likelihood of Yaya Toure going to Emre's Arsenal?
I mean, that's a good shout, to be honest. Probably he hasn't lived in London before, so I'd assume it's probably a big attraction to live in London. He will be playing top football. He'll be playing probably under a manager that he might respect. I don't know, or in a team that plays good football at the moment. He might get some game time because there's still kind of maybe a bit of lacking in the centre of midfield in his kind of position. So I think that's a decent shout by one of our Snapchat followers there. It could happen in January. I wouldn't rule it out, and I think definitely Arsenal will have the money too. So it could be a good shout there. Be interested to see your opinion as well.
I feel like I can't see it happening. However, because I think at the moment Arsenal are quite in a building process. They're going to be buying players for the future, not sort of these one season odd players. And that's why when we suggested last time about Huddersfield, I know it was unlikely, but at the moment, those teams down the bottom, they're happy to buy a player just for the rest of the season because they're not fussed about the future. They're like, right now we are in the relegation zone or down the bottom of the Prem. We need to get out of it. But I feel like if Toure was going to go to any of the top six in this league, Arsenal would be the most likely candidate. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And maybe just behind them, maybe Tottenham. But then again, I don't think Levy would want to spend the money really on him. But I think, Arsenal probably the most likely to have him if he doesn't want to make a move to the top six in the Premier League.
Yeah.
Thank you for whoever Snapchatted us. It's appreciated, and now you've got your opinion on air. So if anybody else wants to hear their opinion aired, please do check us out on Snapchat, which is at Box Commentary, or you can either kind of send us a message on Twitter, which is also at Box Commentary.
Of course, and we do. Just going to touch on this slightly before we talk about Danny Drinkwater and sort of where his career and future's going. I thought it would be a good time to also mention that we've sort of got some big changes lined up for next year. Obviously, the podcast will still be going. Don't you worry about that. I know there was a little heartbeat moment, getting quite nervous then. But no, we're going to be looking to sort of strive to sort of increase our sort of quality of podcast, so to speak. We might make an updates video or at least talk about it more when we do our sort of Christmas special or our 1 year anniversary, which will be coming up soon in the early days of January. But yes, I won't say too much because we sort of give it a little bit of a surprise, but there will be some good changes coming, possibly a little collaboration. That's all I'll say for now, I think, Sam.
Yes, a little collaboration. So just watch the space, really. Check us out on Twitter and keep updated. We may be telling you a bit more in the coming days or so. But yes, and if you haven't seen, we do have our Christmas schedule up, so you can go check that out as well on our Twitter and Instagram. And Instagram is also at Box Commentary. So yeah, just watch the space. It should be interesting. But yes, on to Danny Drinkwater. Of course, I'd say a forgotten man of the Premier League.
I think that is almost a perfect way to describe, because when we were talking about this earlier, when you were mentioning sort of our final topic to talk about, and you mentioned Danny Drinkwater, genuinely, I forgot he even was around. Because obviously played a big role in Leicester winning the league, go to Chelsea. We thought, well, here we go. Maybe he could start something off here. Didn't really play, and like you said, he just forgotten. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, at uni, I go to one of the local pubs to go watch get Premier League games, and with two Chelsea fans. So I've asked them about Danny Drinkwater before, and they're both like, well, it's a sad situation because we've got so many good midfielders. We've got Ruben Loftus-Cheek now coming through, who's probably a better player than Danny Drinkwater. We've got Kovacic, we've got Kante, we've got Jorginho, we've got Fabregas, and it's just like a whole kind of Barkley as well, who's coming to us from. There's a whole plethora of better midfielders than him. So he's not going to find his way into the squad. I mean, of course, he's had a brilliant few seasons at Leicester, and he had an okay kind of first season at Chelsea. But under Sarri, I think Sarri's even said it, his future is up to him and the club, really. I think he's come out and said that Danny Drinkwater is obviously a really good midfielder, but he doesn't fit the system. He, of course, Sarri likes to play a midfield three with kind of Jorginho sitting deep and Kovacic and Kante kind of sitting kind of just ahead of them as kind of like ball-winning midfielders to get set up attacks. And apparently Danny Drinkwater just doesn't suit the tactics, really. He can't really play in the centre, can't really play on the two wide bits of the midfield. He apparently he's just more of a kind of two-man midfield player, and obviously he's not going to get any team time. So it'd be interesting to see what you think. Should he stay there and ride out his future and try and prove to the manager he's good enough in those positions, or is it time for him to kind of throw in the towel, not in terms of retirement, but like at Chelsea, and try and find another club to go to?
I feel like, just to even point out and just back up what we're saying, just to show how much, like, he's only played 12 games while it's been there. So you clearly not being a big player, like you were saying, Sam, and the way that Sarri wants to play is not really suiting into his style. I feel like the best decision is to leave. I feel like even better in January. I just feel like he's never gonna make it at Chelsea in terms of, even if he sort of starts playing some games regularly, I don't think he is at the moment or in previous years shown the quality to be a regular appearance in the Chelsea side. Is that like a fair comment to make, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we've always known that when he left Leicester to Chelsea, he wouldn't necessarily be first choice. And as you said, I think he won't be, I don't think, and he never will be, I don't think. So I think that's a fair assessment, really. I just don't think he expected to be this far down in the pecking order, really. I think it's a shame for him, because this was his kind of chance to make a big move up into kind of a top four club, and it's not gone right for him, really.
Yeah, well, sort of the year before that he joined Chelsea, got his England call up, got 2 or 3 caps under his belt, I think.
And arguably should have been in the World Cup squad as well.
True, that as well. And I feel like this was, at the time, a good decision and good move for him. But I'm looking back at it now and I'm just thinking, I can't really see how it's going to get too much better if he stayed. I don't think possibly a loan from January to the end of the season with a club, and then he makes that move permanent, could be an idea. I think, even actually, to be fair, Sam, someone possibly like Huddersfield again, I could see him slotting into that side, actually. And I don't know whether helping out a team in sort of the relegation battle would be his ideal choice, or whether he feels that he would be more suited to sort of like almost like the Bournemouth, Leicester level, so to speak, like that sort of standard. It's just quite hard when a player does very, very well and then moves to a club and doesn't play for a while. It's almost like you don't know where you fit back in. It's like, when some people talk about, Celtic and Rangers being sort of the best teams in Scotland, and when some people sort of go, oh, should they be in the Premier League? And then there's sort of almost a big debate about, well, we know they do well when they're successful, but where would they fit in? We just don't know. Sort of are they like sort of a Championship side? Are they Premier League, mid-table Premier League, that sort of thing? So it's hard to sort of classify where he'd go. I actually genuinely feel like Huddersfield could be a potential option for him. I feel he would slot in there. I feel like their style of football, not that they've got such a distinctive type, but I feel like the players around him, he would get first team football. And I feel like the club sort of mentality as a little bit like Leicester's, and he's been down there before, when Leicester was struggling for survival, and he's seen progression over time. So it could be a good decision. Do you think that's a fair transfer possibility, or is that just a little bit? Do you feel like he's going to be looking at teams a little bit higher up the league?
I like the idea of you comparing it to the kind of the situation with Rangers and Celtic in the Premier League. Because I think we haven't seen him play obviously in a long time, so we don't know what his ability is. I mean, do you remember Andy King, a Leicester player?
Oh yeah.
He came to us on loan for the last 6 months of the season because he wasn't getting any game time at Leicester, and he did perform fairly well. I kind of see what you mean. Like he could go to Huddersfield in the same kind of situation. But I think for him that's just prolonging just his time at Chelsea. Obviously, he doesn't really want to rush a move now, potentially in January, and go to the wrong club, and that might mean a loan is the best option. But I honestly don't see a future at Chelsea for him, sadly, unless the manager changes, because Sarri's been quite blunt in the way he's put it, and not in a mean way, but just in a kind of we don't need you, sadly. So I think if I was him, I'm thinking, well, I can't really prove to the manager here that I'm good enough to kind of fit into the squad. So I would just think, get out and have a loan, and then try and get a deal either permanently or, as you said, like a loan deal. So, and Huddersfield, I think, would be a good place for him to go, because I mean, if he is as good as he like Sarri said he is, and as we remember him as, he'll be doing so well at Huddersfield, and he might find his way back into the top 6 clubs. Like he might go to Arsenal somewhere, but for the moment, I think he just needs to get out and play games, and I think that's kind of a message to all players in his kind of situation, that sometimes, though you might be earning good money and though you might think you can get into the squad, if the manager's been clear, just get out, go try and find your form somewhere else.
I feel that is like literally perfect advice, especially if you want to start developing your career and keep on going. Literally, game times matter so much, and quite often we do see players who might drop down a league or two where they want to be playing, get some loan time at a lower club, start to perform well, and prove that I can do it at this level. Let's go a bit higher than that. Prove it there, and find where you are, because I think at the moment sometimes, like for example, you might see a young player, let's say a young teenager playing. He's sort of in Arsenal's youth and reserve and things like that. He's not playing any games. He probably won't ever really play a game, at least for a couple of years, where he might get an opportunity if he's very lucky. And you could just continue to play for the club, the reserve side and the 21s, things like that. Or they might want to, maybe put themselves out there a bit. And start going to sort of lower league clubs. You might go to a championship club or even League One. Get some game time, start performing, and getting some game time, improving yourself as a player, developing, experiencing, different leagues, different teams, and approaches to games, things like that, tactics. It's only going to benefit players, really. Like if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. They go back to the club they came from. It's only a loan deal. But if it does work and they start doing well, there you go. It's going to, like you said, if he goes to the likes of Huddersfield or someone, does very well, we could see him at someone like Arsenal in the next couple of years or something. He is, I think he's only 28 still.
Yeah, he's still got plenty of his career left.
Exactly, and I feel like he's an English player as well. We'd like him to keep playing, because I feel like there's obviously a chance that he will get a call up back to England, but I feel like at the moment, especially, he's got no chance, so to speak. Like if he's not playing for Chelsea, and he doesn't quite fit Southgate's young, youthful team, at the moment he's not really got a great opportunity. But if he starts going and playing games, we can see where things could change and he could get a potential call up. Yeah,
exactly. I think that kind of wraps up our kind of talk on Danny Drinkwater. But yeah, on to a topic that you suggested today, and I think it's kind of in the news a lot recently, and I think it's a good topic to kind of discuss, and that's about racism in football at the moment. Of course, we've seen incidences recently, of course, having Sterling having to come out to the media about like the racist Chelsea fans, and we've also had Aubameyang, who was got a banana peel thrown at him in a recent game at Arsenal against, was it Tottenham, I think? And I think you wanted to ask a few kind of questions about it, and maybe kind of raise a few points about racism in football at the moment, and basically, is it on the rise? How can we deal with it, etc., etc.
Yeah, well, I feel like when we look back to previous years in sort of the Premier League and things like that, and just English football in general, I think we can definitely say that, there's been an improvement in reducing racism, kicking it out of football. Like, I remember when they started to introduce the kick racism out of football campaign, and it was just a new thing. I remember seeing sort of Gillingham subs sort of like training and things like that, wearing their top before the game and stuff like that. And it was a new thing. And, I never really thought about it, especially being quite young at that age. Never really occurred to me sort of how big problems can be. I think actually another little story about a Gillingham player who went to Russia, and he suffered a lot of racial abuse. And there was an article written about him in the Metro maybe about 3-4 weeks ago. And it raised a lot of points that I wasn't even aware of, and you can see in especially other countries that this is so consistent. It keeps on happening. So I think in English football we've seen development, but what I wanted to talk about today was mainly in recent times, have we seen much improvement in terms of, say, the last 5 to 10 years? Because there's been issues even with players. We look back at John Terry, where there was an accusation against where he made a racial comment to Anton Ferdinand, obviously Rio Ferdinand's brother. And, there was a little bit of controversy on that, and it was very uncomfortable in the media, and John Terry got into a little bit of trouble for that. I remember he got dropped as captain at the time. Ferdinand got it. And then as soon as the court case was over, Ferdinand got the captain stripped off him straight away, and it got back to Terry. And sort of things were going a bit on with the England squad then. It never was sort of smoothed over, I'd say, between them. And then we look at sort of papers and media and things like that. Obviously, we've heard lots about Sterling, especially with sort of England performances over the last sort of 3-4 years. Looking back at the last Euros and sort of how they played, the World Cup as well. He's only just started scoring for England and performing well. In terms of City, he's playing absolutely incredible lately, and I think we cannot fault him at all for those performances. But when we look at sort of racism in football, there was an interesting point. I think it might have been Gary Neville on some sort of Sky Sports debate where he talked about you look at the likes of sort of Harry Kane, obviously a white English footballer, and when he doesn't perform well, and sort of when Harry Kane is in the media for the wrong reasons, what are the excuses given? Because I feel like no paper will instantly just say, blah 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 performance happened because they are black, or will say black footballer not. But like, I don't feel like those are the sort of things used, but the sort of the thing of racial undertones has been thrown around recently, and I feel like that is the sort of word that describes this best. And I personally do feel like does happen a bit, because we look at Harry Kane in the Euros, he did very well at all. And the main headline, I did a little bit of research as well, just to sort of confirm if what he said was true, it was mainly, why is he on corners? Why is Harry Kane on corners? What is Hodgson's tactics behind this? Is this the reason for why he's playing poorly? And it seemed to be the main excuse. And sort of Neville and people elsewhere, like more recent times, have been saying, just because someone's on corner doesn't mean they're going to be performing badly for the other sort of 80 minutes, 85 minutes of the game. It's a very small percentage. You're just not there on that first threat, that first ball from a corner. So that was sort of the excuse to the reasonings why. And then we look at Raheem Sterling, and I looked at a lot of papers as well, and it's very clear when he's not playing well, it's because he's too distracted on buying new cars, buying fancy houses, splashing his money all over the place, going on holiday too much. Is he not concentrating on his football? And all these sort of excuses are being made almost with not much sort of backing behind it. There is no real sort of evidence or proof. Obviously, it's not, they're all accusations, but it just seems the reasonings why and the certain things that the media do pick out when it comes to black players, most commonly Raheem Sterling, it seems to be for the negative, for the reasons which are just silly. For example, flash cars and flash houses, it's just a silly excuse for performing badly. Yes, it could be a valid excuse and it could be one, but you don't really see players getting other. For example, John Stones, I think he bought this huge house with like a pool and things like that, and it was looked at sort of John Stones buys massive house. He buys one for his mum as well, and he's been playing so well, he developed his career and he's earned this money he can now afford. And then with Sterling, it was like Sterling splashes out on oversized mansion or something like that, and like I looked. Raheem Sterling's one doesn't have a pool. John Stone does. Like it's just like little things like that. It's like they're not even properly sort of factuated. And I know we don't believe everything we see online and media and things like that. And just to sort of try and conclude the point I was made, and then to finish with a question for you, Sam. I feel like the excuses being made by the media, or sort of the reasoning behind why players are underperforming, when it comes to Sterling, it just seems to be silly excuses, let's call them. And with sort of Harry Kane, it seems to be, obviously it's because he's on corners, things like that. So firstly, I want to ask you, do you think there has been a reduction in sort of racial abuse and sort of racial undertones in the last 5 to 10 years? And then can you see, with what's being done right now with like kick racism out of football campaigns, things like this, can you see racism eventually going away from football? And is it, I don't want to bombard your questions, but is it football in particular that sort of can make people not angry, but because it's so passionate, does that bring out the racism in people, so to speak?
On that last point, I was gonna raise that myself. And I think it's not to do with people. Oh, sorry, football. I think it's to do with the people. I think it's a reflection of society. I think these racist fans shouldn't be seen as football supporters sometimes. I think we shouldn't give them the satisfaction of being supporters, because supporters aren't racist towards players and towards other players, and we shouldn't see them as football supporters. They should be just kind of, they're hijacking the sport almost, if that makes any sense. As for, has racism kind of gone down? I mean, in my dad's day, I think I remember my dad saying to me, "Do you know Garth Crooks? Final score I think Premier League striker. He remembers going to a game and fans still throwing bananas at the pitch at him, and he actually used to eat them in retaliation. But for me personally, I can't kind of make a judgment as to whether racism has gone down in football, because I haven't had that kind of experience of any racism in football, and I'm not saying that's because there isn't any, but me personally, I've never experienced anything in a football stadium like it, so it's hard for me to comment whether I think it's gone down. As for like the Kick It Out campaign, I think it can only be a good thing. It's been going for a good 5 or so years now, and it just raises awareness about kind of racism in football. And I think, though, as you said, the media don't help in a lot of senses, they do. They are sometimes pretty good at kind of sending messages, like, and kind of making sure that people that are racist are pointed out, like the Chelsea fans, etc., etc. They are pointed out. And then lastly, the last question you asked me about was about Sterling, and I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of black young players in the Premier League, when they're not performing, they get stick because of their personal life. I mean, if you look at Sterling, he's got 2 kids, and he's as you said, he's got a nice house. He's earned it. He's progressed in his career. He's not a bad influence to anyone, but yet the media portray him as being kind of someone that just splashes the cash. And I think this is not only just for like Sterling, but I also think it's a situation for like Balotelli when he was in the Premier League. I think he was seen as kind of a bad boy just because he splashed his cash a bit, and it doesn't make any sense. And then a more relevant example now, you could say, is Paul Pogba. I mean, just because he's performing badly and he's had a kind of an issue with a manager, it's being kind of all blown out of proportion as if he's now become a bad player and a bad influence, when you should see him in the last few seasons when he's been absolutely amazing. I think the media do have this tendency to kind of jump on young black players and would be the first people to kind of say that they're doing something wrong. Whereas, as you said with Harry Kane can't put a foot wrong. And I'm not saying that's because he has put a foot wrong, but it's kind of that they can't do anything wrong. And I think that's just a problem with the media and not with the public, almost. But yeah, it's racism, I think, will go down in football eventually, but I don't think it will ever go away, sadly, because unless there's something completely changed in society. But I think we can see kind of a decrease in racism in football in the future.
Yeah, I think you've answered all those questions well, made some fair points. I think I'd probably agree with you with all of that, to be fair. Just another little point that just came to mind when you talked about Paul Pogba. I remember there's some videos sort of with Paul Pogba, and he might be with Bailly or Lingard, and they're sort of doing their sort of dances or handshakes and mucking around, and it might be after or sort of before a big game, or it could be after a big defeat. And I think players like Rio Ferdinand and Roy Keane were looking at it and they're thinking, what are these players doing? They should be thinking about this, thinking about that. Why are they having fun? But I feel like back in the day of when you look at that United squad, the attitude was different to the changing room, and we talked about football progressing and things like that. And I think the game has changed. B, different managers bring different atmospheres in the dressing room. Like, we don't really know what Mourinho is like behind closed doors, but we know how Ferguson was, and that was always quite a serious thing. Pogba and Lingard, I feel like with mainly with sort of Pogba and Bailly, when you look at the players back in the day, like the class of '92, it was a predominantly white squad back then, and I feel like the English sort of white mentality, especially under Ferguson, obviously Scottish, but it was quite a serious attitude to everything, and there wasn't really much fun in unless the job was done, so to speak. And I feel like with these sort of French or French African sort of players, it's a different approach to football. It's a lot more lively, it's a lot more upbeat. It's very fun, lots of singing, lots of dancing, and I feel like that's just his culture, sort of his background, how he's used to doing things. Pogba's in general he seems like quite a happy, quite a fun personality. Lots of dancing and singing and things like that, mucking around, jokes and stuff. We see Patrice Evra all the time online. When he does his sort of like funny videos, and he does that classic "I love this game" sort of stuff, and I feel like that is the sort of French African sort of culture in a way, and that's just how it is. And I feel like possibly some older journalists who've sort of been used to that very serious English class of '92, this is how success is done, possibly isn't used to what is experiencing right now. Could be a potential reason. I don't know how strong of a case that is, but I think it's definitely something worth to at least mention.
Yeah, true. I think that's kind of true. And I think that kind of sums up really our kind of conversation on racism. Of course, you can get involved in this kind of topic. And if you do experience kind of racism in football, I would just suggest speak to stewards at the game, report it to the FA, or kind of go on like I can't remember what was the campaign called. I can't remember now. Kick racism out. Kick racism out, of course. But yeah, I think it's good that we've had a debate like this because it's an important debate to have. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this kind of last little topic. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed the whole podcast all the same as well. Of course, we have talked about Mourinho a lot, but we might not talk about Mourinho for another 6 months now, so we've got to make the most of it today.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed. I certainly have. I think Jake has as well. We've got a Christmas-themed podcast coming out on Monday, which is Christmas Eve. So look forward to that. I certainly am as well. Be a bit of Christmas kind of games and Christmas kind of topics as well, so that should be interesting. And then of course go check out the rest of our Christmas schedule on our Instagram or Twitter, which is at Box Commentary, both of them. But yes, thank you for listening. See you soon then, really.
See you soon.
See ya.